16. The Hermitage's last secret. Aelita woke up at 3 in the morning with a jolt. Had she been sleepwalking again? Yes, apparently, because she didn't know where she was. But this time, the dream had been really terrible, on Lyoko, then in a science fiction city where the man with 2 dogs and the ghost of her father were wandering around. She was in her pajamas, covered in sweat, and shaking in fear. What had happened? She stood up, blinked, looked around to get her bearings, and found herself behind a television set. The room was almost empty. There was just a small sofa and a small door. And it was so low that one would need to crawl on all fours to get through. This was the secret room of the Hermitage that she and her friends had found together thanks to the plan that her father had nicely drawn in ink in a notebook. If the young girl had come there, it could only mean that she had, in her sleep, crossed through the entire passage leading from Carthage to the cellar of the villa. A bit lost, she looked at the white wall in front of her. It had scratch marks all over as if an animal had desperately tried to get through. Immediately, Aelita looked down at her hands. Her nails were full of plaster and the ends of her fingers were worn down to the point of being covered in blood. So, it had been she, during her sleep, who had lacerated the wall. But why? She placed her ear against the wall and tapped it several times. Judging by the sound, the wall sounded hollow on the other side. She needed to break through it immediately to discover what lay on the other side. Aelita began searching for a tool, anything she could use, to break through this wall. She entered the storeroom where she and Jeremy had earlier found sacks of cement with the address of the Brulette Company. This was the first hint that drove them to discover the secret room. The storeroom was narrow and full of bricks, dusty sacks, and other mason tools. But, lying at an angle, there was an old, slightly rusted pickaxe that would be perfect for the job. She dragged the pickaxe into the secret room, then pushed the television set far from the wall to make room. She sweated and panted from all the effort. The pickaxe was very heavy. However, Aelita wasn't worried by the fatigue now that she was persuaded that the Hermitage was hiding another secret, and her dream had shown her the way to uncover it. She lifted the tool and struck it against the wall, but the wooden handle slipped through her hands and merely chipped away at the primer. She had to keep trying. She moved her hands further apart on the length of the handle, caught her breath, then hurled the pickaxe with all her might against the wall. It gave way in one hit, leaving the young girl coughing by the dust and debris. This wall had been built with the intent to be easily demolished. Her father had wished for her to discover this new secret room, constructed behind the first. The words of Philippe Brulette, the mason who had worked for her father, came back to her. It must have been about 10 years ago, but I remember it well. Hopper asked a personal favor of me. I had to return to the Hermitage and wall up a section of the house, so as to create a hidden room invisible from the outside. A section of the house, is what he had said, not just a room. The answer had been right in front of their eyes since the start and they hadn't seen it. Aelita had broken a hole into the wall about 30 centimeters wide. She rubbed her eyes, which were red from all the dust, and looked through the hole. Her mouth opened wide. She took hold of the pickaxe to enlarge the hole and pass through to the other side. Her phone. She needed to call Jeremy right away. But she didn't have her phone on her since she had arrived there by sleepwalking, dressed only in her pajamas. She made a quick U-turn. That night, Jeremy went to sleep as soon as he had laid his head on his pillow, exhausted by all the emotions of the past few days. However, he jumped awake when he heard knocking on his bedroom door. "Who is it?" "It's me, Aelita. Can I come in?" He hurried to open the door for his friend. He thought he had seen a ghost at first when he saw her swollen eyes and disheveled hair. She was also dressed in a funny pair of jeans made up of different colored fabric and a sweatshirt. Aelita stammered Jeremy. "But what time is it? What are you doing here? Come on. We have to hurry." "But what?" "Come on, quick," she insisted. "Put on some pants. It's very important." Jeremy obeyed, then together they crossed through the deserted dormitory halls. They left through the park at Carthage and weaved silently through the trees, then passed through the hole in the fence to finally arrive at the Hermitage. The young girl didn't utter a word until they reached the basement. Once there, she motioned towards the secret room and murmured, "Get ready for a great surprise, Jeremy." Together, they activated the mechanism to open the way into the secret room. The boy entered first and saw the hole in the wall. And he as well was shocked to silence. Aelita had found a new room, bigger than the first, and illuminated by a large neon light. The center of the room contained a scanner, similar to the ones at the abandoned factory, but that appeared older. On a sign on the sliding door, an inscription was flashing: "Caution, danger. Unsafe for those over 18 years of age." There was also a large supercomputer beside the wall hooked up to the scanner. Jeremy caught a glimpse of a control terminal too. It was a version much more primitive than the command console underground at the factory. "But, Aelita," he exhaled, once he recovered from the shock. "You found Lyoko?" "Well, one of its replicas. Like the one that Yumi and Ulrich saw in Brussels, or quite close to it." "Okay, I'm going to take the scanner right away to go visit this world." "You can't do that all alone," immediately replied Jeremy while adjusting his glasses. "We need to call Yumi, Ulrich, and Odd. It could be dangerous." "We need to." Aelita approached her friend and placed her hands on his shoulder. She was so close to him that he could smell her sweet perfume. "I called you because I need you at the controls," she explained. "It's my duty to enter the replica. My father guided me here in a series of dreams, and I know that he would want it to be me who is virtualist on this replica. So, do you want to help me?" Jeremy blushed, then took Aelita into his arms. All right, leave it to me." In a beam of light, the body of the young girl lifted into the air to be transformed, then returned to touch the ground. Aelita had again taken her elf-like appearance, and the landscape surrounding her resembled the forest sector of Lyoko. But it wasn't exactly the same. The sky was like a plain, azure color, without any differing shades, and the ground was a simple extended green. For a moment, she was hit by a wave of vertigo from the virtualization. In front of her, there were 3 trees. They were large oak trees with brown trunks and large leaves that reflected a game of shadows and light on the ground. Apart from them, there wasn't anything else, just a flat, green, and blue surface that extended as far as the eye could see. "Is everything all right?" asked Jeremy from his post at the controls. Aelita heard the voice of her friend directly in her ear. "Yes," she replied. "I'm a bit scared, but all right. I wonder what the inscription means on the scanner, 'Danger for those over 18 years of age,'" added Jeremy pensively. "Well, I'm a minor, so everything should be fine," responded Aelita. "Also, I don't think there are any monsters around here. There isn't even a city. Just 3 trees." She took several steps in their direction, then ran up to them. She approached the first tree, then Jeremy announced, "A message just appeared on my screen. It says that this tree is number 1. There is a date, 1985, and an inscription, 'End of Project Carthage.'" The young girl lightly touched the trunk of the big tree, and right away, a long and narrow hole opened up, revealing an empty space. She observed it for a moment, then entered. "How about now?" she asked her friend. "I have no clue," he responded. Aelita found herself in a huge deserted laboratory without any windows. It was cluttered with metal tables, machines, big microscopes, and computers, but no chairs. And a series of neon lights illuminated the room. "Ah, it's you," a voice spoke. Aelita turned towards it abruptly. Her father. She saw her father, Franz, leaning over a microscope and dressed in a white lab coat. And beside him, she saw a beautiful woman with red hair also in a lab coat. "Daddy, Mummy," she cried out, running to hug them. But she passed through her parents as if they were ghosts and fell with a thump against the microscope table. She quickly stood up, called to them again, and tried again to hug them. Sadly, she wasn't even able to touch them. "Calm down, Aelita," Jeremy gently spoke. "My screen is covered with notes. What you are currently seeing is a simulation, or rather, a 3-dimensional recording of something that happened long ago. I'd say, in 1985. Your parents aren't real. You can't touch them, and they can't hear you." Aelita threw her fist against the table and cried out in anger, "It's not fair." "I know," he sighed. "But if your father wanted to show you something, you should pay attention and listen, don't you think?" At the same time, the professor raised his nose from his microscope and turned towards his wife. Then, he gave a slight smile from under his beard and said, "Anthea, I'm tired, I know, dear. How far along are you?" "It won't be much longer, 2 months, maybe 3, and then finally, Project Carthage will be functioning. We did it. It will be a great day for the entire world." After these words, a faint sadness swept across Anthea's eyes. My love, said Hopper, concerned. What's wrong? I found the documents that we were looking for. It wasn't easy. So, insisted the professor. Unfortunately, our doubts were well-founded. Carthage will not save the world, but the opposite. It could even help destroy it, because inside the first city, they inserted a dark zone that we cannot control and that will transform Carthage into a weapon of mass destruction. Hopper closed his fists. Immediately, the laboratory, he and his wife, and the whole virtual world dissolved around Aelita as if someone had melted it with acid. The young girl found herself now in a small and very welcoming living room. There was a couch, a red floral rug, and large bookshelves on all the walls. Her father was sitting on the couch with his head between his hands, and his wife was holding him tenderly. A little girl of 3 years of age was playing on the ground. She was wearing a silly, little, pink dress and had bright, red hair, all cut short. She had with her a doll in the form of an elf. Mr. Puck, cried Aelita, while looking at the doll. Yes, it's your favorite toy, announced Jeremy from the computer. So, this little girl must be you, like you were in the past. You were cute. In the living room, Anthea was murmuring something into Professor Hopper's ear. No, he shouted, raising his head. We sacrificed our whole lives for this project. Our daughter was born in a military base, and we haven't been able to see anyone for months. And all that for what? To create a new weapon? I won't allow it. Speak more quietly, dear, responded Anthea. The room may be under surveillance. From now on, we can no longer be sure of anything. I couldn't care less, rumbled Aelita's father. So what if they hear? I built Carthage to bring the world to a better place and not to drive it to its ruin. The electronic communications control should serve to provide low-cost services to everyone, including those in the third world or in great difficulty. But these maniacs only want to take advantage of it as a weapon for control in their stupid war. Personally, I don't care if a person is Russian or American. They are still human beings. All equal. I agree with you, Anthea responded, hugging him. But what can we do? They are now capable of ending the project, even without our help. And don't forget Aelita. If we expose too much, who will take care of her? The couple remained quiet for a good while, observing the little girl playing on the carpet, laughing and hugging her toy. Hopper then murmured, we can escape. I don't know how yet, but we'll do it. If we created Carthage even though everyone thought it was crazy, then we can do plenty of other things. We will destroy what we built. They'll be left with nothing, and we'll escape with our dear Aelita. But we'll bring the fruits of all our years of sacrifice and labor with us, and we will find a way to continue to study somewhere else to give birth to a new Carthage. On the rug, the little girl smiled to her parents and babbled, Lyoko. Hopper reached out a hand to caress her face and said, Lyoko? Yes, my dear. If we build a new Carthage, we could call it Lyoko. It's a wonderful name. Suddenly, Aelita found herself back on the vast plains in front of the tree. It's over, she asked Jeremy. Almost. I just have to finish saving it. By the way, aren't there still the other trees? According to my computer, the next tree covers the period of time from 1985 to 1988 and is called A Life Incognito. The young girl took the several steps that separated her from the second oak tree. Then, she reached out her hand and once again, the trunk opened up to let her pass through. This time, she found herself in the courtyard of a military base. It was very cold. The blockhouses of cement were covered by snow and large searchlights swept the courtyard, illuminating in fits and starts the surrounding walls and the rolls of barbed wire. Men were restless in every sense, holding big dogs on leashes. Helicopters lifted up into the sky, and sirens were blaring, provoking a lot of movement below. Aelita noticed a couple crossing the courtyard and rushing towards a jeep. They were a slender woman and a stocky man, both wrapped in large, hooded military coats to protect themselves from the cold. Were these her parents? She decided not to take the risk of letting them out of her sight and dived onto the seat in the back of the jeep. A moment later, the woman took to the steering wheel and removed her hood. The man sat in the passenger seat and remained hooded. Aelita placed her hand in front of her mouth to stifle a surprised gasp. This person wasn't her mother, but a young woman with thick, black, curly hair and a dainty nose. She knew this face. It seemed to her as if she had seen it before somewhere else, but where? She couldn't remember. "Professor Schaffer," said the woman while starting the car. "Stay calm and let me handle this. They won't stop us, you'll see." The man nodded. He finally opened a large coat, and a smiling, small, red head of hair came out of it. Hopper hugged the girl and immediately sheltered her from sight. "Be sweet, Aelita," he said softly. "No one must know that you're here, so don't make any noise. Be on your best behavior, and in a bit, you'll be able to go to bed, promise." "You were already a little brat," laughed Jeremy in Aelita's ear. The young girl didn't reply. She was too busy watching the scene unfold around her. She wanted to hear everything. The jeep started up and crossed the courtyard to meet up at a checkpoint where a metallic sentry box was protecting a double barrier. This was the exit. 2 soldiers left the lookout post, all wrapped up warmly and with their guns over their shoulders. One of the 2 pointed his gun towards the jeep, while the other headed towards the window and greeted the woman who was driving. "Good evening, Major Steinbach." "At ease, soldier," she responded. "And open the barrier, I'm in a hurry." "Sorry Major, but the barrier won't be opening tonight. There was a violation of the security code and the colonel personally ordered me to leave the base on a mission of absolute priority," replied the driver, frenetically. "You see this man beside me? He isn't hiding his face for nothing. I have an ID that gives me full power here, and I can guarantee you that if this barrier doesn't open in the next 10 seconds, starting tomorrow, and for the rest of your life, you'll be doing nothing other than cleaning the toilets from morning till night." The soldier remained still for a second, then finished by saying, "Yes, Major. I'll open the barrier right away." In the jeep, the professor smiled. "Permission from the colonel. I have my connections, Professor, don't worry," she murmured. The jeep passed the barrier and raced off into the night on an icy road. The base was located at the top of a small hill bordered by birch trees covered with snow that went on past the horizon. Hopper began to speak again. "How could I not worry? Aelita and I are saved, but Anthea, we will find her, Professor," responded the woman. "You have my word. I have my contacts, and they are already on the job. Soon, we will know just who took her and why, and we will be able to escape with her also. For the time being, the most important thing is that you have made it out with the documents. I was called the Relentless, remember? I don't have the right to make a mistake." Aelita fell from the back seat and found herself directly on an embankment. The change of scenery was so jarring that it made her head spin. Now, she was under the sun in the yard of a simple cottage surrounded by other similar houses. Far away up in the mountains in the snowy peaks. Her father wore a suit and tie and had a leather briefcase. He climbed up to the house and opened the door with a small key. A car then pulled over in the yard, and a driver stepped out. It was the woman who had helped the professor escape before. She was in a military outfit and wore her ranks on her shoulder. "Allow me, Major," said Hopper, opening the door to the house. "After you." "Thank you. We can talk in peace." Aelita followed the 2 adults inside. The few pieces of furniture they had were old and out of fashion. It seemed like a home without a soul that was only being rented for a brief amount of time. Hopper showed the Major to a seat, then went to prepare some coffee. "How is the little one doing?" asked the woman. "Very well. Aelita has a great babysitter, but I plan to enroll her in nursery school soon. She is old enough now, and she needs to be around other kids." "I'm sorry, Professor," spoke Major Steinbach, "but you'll need to move again in less than a month." "That's a shame," sighed Aelita's father. "I was getting used to being employee Henry's Upfi. We'll give you a new identity in another place of work." Again, the Major took the cup of coffee that Hopper handed to her. She drank some of it and spoke. "You know why I am here. I have news for you." "You found Anthea?" asked Hopper, his eyes suddenly glimmering. "Not yet, unfortunately. But we finished our research and we know who is responsible for taking her, a soldier who left at the time of your wife's disappearance." "I want to see his file," cried the professor straight away. "I figured as much, so I brought it for you," she continued. "But I recommend you don't do anything stupid and let me work on the investigation. The man is named Mark James Hollenbeck. He is 21 years old. He entered the army at 16 years old, and he worked at the base of the project for a year. We don't know why he decided to do such a stupid thing yet, but we're on his trail. Aelita etched this name into her mind, Hollenbeck. Mark Hollenbeck. The man who took her mother. Then, the scene changed again. The young girl found herself underneath the porch of the Hermitage on a cold winter morning. Or at least, it must have been cold, judging by the color of the sky and the movement of the trees shaken by the wind, but she couldn't feel anything. On the door of the house, someone had just attached a panel, "Sold." A small van arrived, lurching when braking, and pulled up in front of the Hermitage. Child Aelita climbed out. She was now 6 years of age and already better resembled the young girl who was watching her double from under the front porch. "Are we here, Daddy?" asked the little girl. "Yes," responded her father, now descending himself from the van. From sitting in the driver's seat, Major Steinbach got out, this time in civilian clothes. She was wearing a red shirt and a pair of jeans. "And here is your new home," she announced to the professor in a cheerful tone of voice. "If all goes well, you can sign Aelita up for school and settle in a bit." Under the porch, the young elf girl smiled to see these two be less formal with each other. How many years had passed since their escape from the military base? At least 2 or 3. Her father and the major started to unload the boxes from the van into the house while the little Aelita played in the yard. "So, who will I be starting from today?" asked the professor. "Your new identity will make you quite happy," answered the woman. "You are Franz Hopper, science teacher at Carthage Academy, which is close by here. I will also be working at the school, under a fake name. That way, I'll be able to watch over you." They laughed. Then, Waldo Schaffer officially became Franz Hopper, and added with a grave tone, "What interests me is to be able to get back to my research as quickly as possible. And especially to find Anthea. I've already made contact with a local manufacturer," the woman assured him. "He possesses a factory not far from here. We can reconstruct the underground level and transform it into a laboratory. The owner will give us his response in a bit, but he seemed very interested by our research." "And Hollenbeck?" asked Hopper with a bit of anxiety in his voice. "Unfortunately, I haven't gotten any more news about him for some time now. He changed his name and joined a criminal organization. He managed to cover his tracks. We thought he was an idiot, but actually, he is very intelligent. We even call him the Magician." Hopper placed a big crate on the ground and showed his friend the pendant that he wore under his sweater. This was the one that Aelita knew, with the W and the A engraved on it. "Anthea is alive and doing well," said the professor. "That's what this pendant tells me. So, I will continue to look for her, day and night, until I find her. I will always be here to help you," assured Major Steinbach. "Anthea was my best friend. I swore to bring her back to you and your daughter, no matter what." Aelita once again found herself in front of the hollow tree on the strange flat land of the replica. Being in a virtual world was always tiring for her and often gave her vertigo, but this time, with all these stories, her father, and the disappearance of her mother, and finally this Major Steinbach who was working for the army and who Aelita had never heard of before. "Go on," Jeremy urged. "Face the third tree." "What does the computer say?" asked the young girl. "It's not very clear," answered the schoolboy with a yawn. "It's written that we'll access a new level of the replica. And there's also this note, 'Enter only when your heart is ready.'" "But I'm super ready," declared Aelita. "Let's go." Replied Jeremy, yawning once more. "Maybe this isn't a good idea. It's 5 in the morning, you haven't slept, and for tonight, you've already had a big dose of surprises, right? The replica won't run away. It'd be better to come back with the others when we are more rested. At the end of the day, we didn't find any monsters, but we don't know what could be hiding on the new level of this strange private diary." Jeremy's yawns were contagious, because Aelita suddenly felt very tired too. "Maybe, you might be right," she sighed. "Perfect," cried her friend. "Then get ready, because..." Materialization. The young girl watched her body devitalize, her arms and her legs became completely transparent and eventually disappeared. The instant afterwards, she blinked and saw that she was already inside the scanner in the secret room of the Hermitage. The door of the scanner slid to the side. Jeremy was there to hug her. "How are you?" he asked her sweetly. "Good, really good," she replied. "But I need a bit of sleep," they laughed. Epilogue. Oh, odd. Finally, you're here, cried Ulrich upon seeing his friend crossing the school hallway with Eva. The two school kids were holding hands, and the young boy had a dazzling smile. Haha, snickered Yumi. So, that's why we didn't see you yesterday. You were too busy, so, odd. What's been going on? Asked Ulrich. What have you been up to? Tell us everything. Oh, nothing in particular, responded the runaway. I just went for a little stroll. Suddenly, Jeremy and Aelita joined the group of friends. Both seemed not to have slept a wink. So, what's with you guys today? Insisted Ulrich, surprised. Jeremy adjusted his glasses on the end of his nose and announced, we have some news. Yesterday, Aelita discovered a new secret room in the cellar of the Hermitage. Wow. That's so cool, exclaimed Odd. And what was inside? Everyone gathered in a circle to listen to Aelita. She started to tell them about all the events from the last night, but she had trouble talking, because she was constantly being interrupted. At the end of Aelita's story, Eva, who was leaning against the wall, murmured, looks like a new adventure is about to begin. Or maybe the old one isn't over yet. Ulrich clarified. Because a bunch of mysteries remain, we will solve them together, concluded Jeremy. The group of friends were so absorbed in the news that none of them noticed Miss Hertz passing by to start class. She was wearing a white lab coat and had with her a blue dossier. She had heard the last sentence from her favorite student and smiled while announcing, Jeremy, I don't know if you'll manage to solve them this time or not, because for today's lesson, I've prepared some really difficult problems. Come on, get to class all of you. Yumi waved them goodbye and went to her class, while Odd and Ulrich sighed. A new day of classes began. Aelita hung back for a moment. She watched her friends enter class, then Professor Hertz place a hand on Jeremy's shoulder. Miss Hertz. For a moment, the young girl tried to imagine her several years in the past, younger, with short hair and no glasses, wearing the uniform of a major in the army. Was it possible? Aelita stopped herself while laughing. No, of course not. What was she thinking? The professor couldn't be a secret agent. She hurried to class and closed the door behind her.
I found the way that I instate the theory. Kinda sad that it's the last chapter of the book though. Anyway, I was able to take the full PDF file into a Word format, gathered the chapter that I wanted, put it into a WordPad document, and then put the file into a PDF converter and presto. I'm able to nab the chapters that I want without hassle and avoid the reader say the top and bottom of the pages. The page number and the title of the chapter on each page. This will be the format for future episodes, unless my computer has some more malicious ideas. So anyways, we are able to delve into yet another replica, and with even more lore into Aelita's childhood and where she came from. And Suzanne Hertz? A secret agent? Nah. Anyway, more lore and story into the next book. And I hope to see you all into the next episode of HERTZ Book Reading. Be sure to subscribe and hit the bell for future episodes. And I'll see you all later.